Shalom, my friends from here in Israel. It's that time again now that we are together on this day of the week, on Tuesday at 3 o'clock p.m. Israel time. So thank you for joining me. Every week we deal with a different topic or explore a different place in Israel, and I invite you to write in where you want me to report from or different issues that you want me to speak about, whether it's politics or Jewish faith or fellowship work. Write in what you would like to see. But today's a very special day. It is the beginning of the month of Adar. There are 12 Hebrew months, just like there are 12 English months. In Hebrew, they're called Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, Tevet, Shvat, Adar, that's what we're in, Nisan, Iyar, Tzivan, Tammuz, Av, and Elul. So Adar, each month is summed up with a different characteristic. For example, the month that Passover takes place in is the energy of redemption. The month of Hanukkah is the energy of miracles. We're in the month of Purim, and that is the energy of joy. The whole topic of Purim relates to joy. And why are we joyous? Because we know that God is with us. In the story of Purim, which we'll speak about in a minute, we see that God was so hidden, but he was there the entire time. He works through people. He works through us. And just as we say about Esther, that she was brought there to that place of power for such a time as this, so too each one of us in our lives are brought to exactly where we are, because that's exactly where we're supposed to be. God has a plan for us. God has a vision for us, and we are the ones that decide, are we going to fulfill that or not? And so the month of Adar teaches us that the whole secret to fulfilling our mission, for being created for such a time as this, is by being joyous, is by always recognizing, no matter what you're going through, that God is with you. And as we say in Hebrew, mitzvah gedola liot besimcha. It's a big, positive commandment, a mitzvah, to be joyous. And so Adar is a month of being joyous, of being in joy. And in fact, the word Adar is made up of 3 letters, Aleph, Daled, and Resh. Aleph represents God, because it's the first letter in the alphabet, in the Hebrew alphabet, and it's one, just like God is one. And so what the word Adar means, which is the month of Purim, is God, Aleph, one, dwelling within our homes, within our lives. The word dar comes from the word dira, which is a home. And so just yesterday I was reading how the Chalban, a very righteous man in our generation, was teaching how this is the holiday where God comes and dwells within us, in our homes, in the world, even closer than he normally is. And why is he able to dwell in this world so intensely during the month of Adar? Because we're joyous. Because the mitzvah gdola liot besimcha, because it's a big positive commandment to be joyous. So in the month of Adar, when everyone is celebrating and happy, God could come and dwell here. And it's very interesting, because what's the whole story of Purim? Where do we learn about it? We learn about it from Megillat Esther, from the book of Esther. And there's a teaching that, there are so many teachings on it, but one of the teachings that has resonated the most in my heart is that Esther calls evil Haman and Achashverosh, her husband, the king, to come together. She says to her husband Achashverosh, I have something I want to ask of you. Please come meet me with evil Haman, and then I'll tell you what I want. So she goes to meet them, and in the book of Esther it says that Haman was happy, everything was going good for him. He was in a good place, he was happy, he was good, and they show up, and King Achashverosh says to Esther, what is it I could do for you? What do you want? Ad chetzi malchut, until half of my kingdom I'll give to you. What is it that you want? And Queen Esther says, come back tomorrow. And this is something that if you look at and read with pure eyes, you say, why did she say come back tomorrow? Why didn't she just say what she wanted to say? And so our holy sages tell us that she saw that Haman was happy, that he was in positive spirits, that he had joy in his heart. And so Queen Esther knew if he has joy in his heart and he's in positive spirits, nothing could touch him. God can't send down any negative decrees against him. And so Queen Esther said, come back tomorrow, hoping that the next day he won't be so happy, hoping the next day he won't be in such positive spirits. And it's from there that we really see the downfall of Haman. Then we see he started getting upset, he started getting nervous, he started getting angry. The next day comes, and we know he wasn't in such good spirits. And Ahasuerus says to Esther, what is it I could do for you? Until half of my kingdom I'll be happy to give you. And Queen Esther then says, wicked Haman is trying to wipe out my people. And God maneuvered everything so that King Ahasuerus will see that Haman was wicked. And it's from there that Haman had his downfall. It's from there that everything started to go bad for him, and eventually he ended up being hung on the tree and killed. But what we learn from this is if Haman would have gone in with joy, nothing could have touched him. So imagine us, people of faith, people with morals and values who appreciate God's word, who appreciates reading the Bible and doing good in the world, who appreciate spreading life and joy and justice. Imagine when we're happy, how nothing can touch us. Nothing can touch us. The most important thing in life is always to be happy. And how could you be happy? What's the trick of being happy even when things are difficult? Is to know that those things too are from God. Is to know that God would never give you something that's too difficult for you. And even in your hardships, God is with you. God is with you. In fact, we know the first time God speaks to Moses, he says to him, remove your shoes, right? Remove your shoes so I can speak to you. But the same word for shoes, na'al, is also the same word for chains. God is saying to Moses, remove those chains. And he's saying it to us. Because whatever God said to Moses is a message to us. He's telling us, remove your chains and then I can speak to you. Remove all those things that are holding you down. The sadness, the depression, the fear, the anxiety, the uncertainty, the mistrust. All of those chains that are holding you down, remove them. And then God can speak to us. Then we can receive God's word. And so in this month of Adar especially, always it's important to be joyous. But there are some months that actually aren't so joyous, like the month of Av. The Hebrew month of Av is the month when both temples were destroyed. It's a sad month. It's a month of mourning. And what God tells us is that there's a place to mourn. There's a place to be sad. There's a place to mourn something that was destroyed. But we have to make sure that we put everything in their boxes. That when it's a time for mourning, we mourn. When it's a time for rejoicing, we rejoice. Don't mourn when it's time to rejoice and rejoice when it's time to mourn. God gave us a structure for our emotions and says, trust me in this. Because these are the energies in which I created the world. And so now we're in the month of Adar, and there's even a little song that goes with the month of Adar that you hear on repeat here in Israel. All the kids going around singing, Mishem, 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 Nichnas Adar. And it says, whoever enters the month of Adar enters the month with joy. With not only joy, but the biggest joy. That's the song that goes with Adar. So here in Israel, you can feel the Adar energies. Everywhere you go, there's blasting loud music, singing different songs of joy. People are getting dressed up. And it's interesting because what are the commandments of Purim? It's not like Passover that you can't eat leavened flour. It's not like Hanukkah that you have to light the menorah. On Purim, all of the commandments are between man and man. Not only between man and God like most of the other holidays. On Purim, when you read the book of Esther, what do you see? At the end of the book of Esther, it says, and therefore, because of the miracles that God has done for us, every year on this date, we should give charity. Matanot le'evyonim. We should give each other mishloach manot. We give each other fruit baskets and different food baskets so that they can make a blessing on the food and be joyous. And we have to hear the book of Esther so that we always remember. And so how are we happy? What God's saying is the recipe for being happy. The recipe for being happy is sharing with others. Is ben adam lechavero, is between man and man, is between giving gifts to others. What's the recipe for being happy? Giving charity. Matanot levyonim, what we do on Purim. What's the trick to being happy? Giving away these fruit baskets. The trick to being happy is being surrounded by good deeds and doing good deeds. And also receiving other people's good deeds. Because one of the commandments is to give charity, but the other commandment is just to give out the fruit baskets to your friends. It's saying don't only focus on the poor. You have to focus on the poor, but also focus on your friends. Also go out and do something nice for your neighbor, or for your family members, or for your synagogue, or for your church, or for your friends and family and everyone. Not only those who are in need. And that's the trick to being happy. And to never losing faith. Because how did the whole story of Purim begin? The whole story of Purim began was that the first temple was destroyed in Jerusalem. The Jews were exiled. The prophets said that in 70 years, the second temple will be rebuilt. And so they started counting. But as we learned, there's all different ways to start counting. From what point do you start counting those 70 years? And so the whole feast of Achashverosh, which is what the story of Purim started with, the whole feast, do you know what that feast was celebrating? That feast was celebrating that 70 years passed and the second temple wasn't rebuilt yet. And that means that God has abandoned his nation. And that means that the second temple will never be rebuilt. And that means that the Jewish people should despair. That's what Achashverosh was celebrating. That's what the feast was. And that is why Mordechai refused to go. And his wife Vashti, he was drinking from the vessels, the holy vessels of the temple, of the high priest. Achashverosh was wearing the clothing of the high priest. He was mocking God. And that's the downfall. That's the downfall, not trusting in God. And he wanted everyone to bow down to him, Achashverosh, like he was God. And Mordechai, the Jew, said, no, I will not bow down to you. I only bow down to God. And so a lot of the people could have looked at Mordechai and said, why are you starting these problems for us? Just bow down already. Imagine during that time, before you knew that all these miracles would happen, that you look at what Mordechai did and you would say, why did you do that? Why are you starting problems for the Jewish people? But no, he was shining a light on something that has to change. And what is it that had to change? Amalek. We have a commandment to wipe out Amalek in every single generation. You remember Amalek, the ones when the Jews were walking through the desert and they came to the back, to the weakest, and tried to attack. And God said, in every generation you have a responsibility to destroy Amalek. Now, that means that the second we're born into war. We're born into war with Amalek. But what's Amalek? Amalek is no longer a person or even a nation. And that's exactly the danger in Amalek. Is that Amalek is always changing colors in every generation. Haman came from Amalek. And you know where Amalek came from? Tradition holds that Amalek came from the Nachash, the snake in the Garden of Eden, who tricked them into touching and eventually eating from the tree of life and death, of eating from the tree of death. That was the snake. Amalek comes from the snake. Because what's a snake? Let's think about it. What's a snake? A snake attacks from the back, is very tricky, that it bites somebody, and you don't see it from the outside. It's not like a lion, that a lion attacks and comes and chases after someone and mauls their body and tears it apart. No, no, no. A snake slithers up, gives a little bite, doesn't really look like anything on the outside, but everything happens on the inside. A snake's bite destroys somebody from the inside. That you don't see it. but before you know it, the venom went through their body and they die. That's Amalek. And that's the danger of Amalek, is that so often we can't even identify who or what is Amalek. Okay, now we could look back and say the Nazis were Amalek. Maybe we could look back and say throughout each generation who the Amalek force in that generation was. But so often during that time, they didn't look like Amalek. They looked like they were fighting for a good cause. But that's the snake, is that they look like they're fighting for a good cause. They look like they're fighting for justice. Did you know that the Nazis were very, very, very adamant about animal rights? Did you know that they were very progressive and modern and liberal in a lot of different ways? That's what Amalek is. Amalek is a disguise. And I don't think we have any group of people these days who everyone is Amalek. And that's exactly the danger. People who say all Muslims are bad. No, that's not true. There are Muslims who are being persecuted in the Middle East right now, just like the Jews and Christians. And there are people who look, and that's the whole thing with our petition, that say Christians are bad. They're the alternative, right? And the answer is no. No, no, no. And there are people who look at Jews and say there are Jews that are bad. And the answer is don't judge all the Jews by a few people. Amalek, in this generation now, is not a group of people. You can't look and say the Muslims are Amalek, or the Christians, or the Jews, or the liberals, or the Democrats, or the Republicans. We have to stand unified. That's the message of Adar. We have to stand unified, but alert. And we have to look for those snakes that we see are causing venom from the inside. And what's the biggest venom that you could spread? Is spreading us apart. When we're unified, nothing can touch us. When we travel together, just like the Israelites traveled in the desert in Egypt, we had the Ananei Kavod, we had the cloud of glory that surrounded us. Nothing could touch us. When we're unified, nothing can touch us. We need to stand unified. We need to stand alert, though. And to also recognize that in every generation there is real evil. Real evil. So we can't be naive. We have to stand unified. We have to stand in love. We have to stand as one. We have to stand in respect, but we have to stand alert. And when we see evil, we need to weed it out. And I'll tell you something that's evil that's happening right now. Something that's evil that's happening right now is that Christian communities across the Middle East are being wiped out by ISIS, by Islamic extremists. That's evil. And we have to stand unified against that. The Jewish community, the Muslim community, the Christian community has to stand unified against the Christians being wiped out in the Middle East. ISIS, Al-Qaeda, all of these terrorist groups, the Islamic extremists, their first target, because there aren't many Jews left in the Middle East anymore because they all came to Israel. So there used to be a lot of Jews in Iraq and in Yemen and in Morocco and in Turkey. And now there aren't so many Jews left there anymore in Egypt. But now there are Christians left. So now all the terrorists are going for the Christians. And we have to stand unified against that Amalek going after the Christians being persecuted in the Middle East. And what's happening in America right now, that Jewish schools and community centers are being evacuated daily in almost every single state because of bomb threats. We have to stand unified against that. That's Amalek. That's Amalek tearing us apart from the inside. And we don't know yet if it's a few crazy individuals or if it's an entire movement. But in the past few weeks, there have been over 100 threats and attacks on Jews in America. And when I was younger, we were taught that we used to hear the story of our grandparents surviving the Holocaust. And all of us kids would be a little bit nervous and say, okay, I'm scared to be Jewish because this is what happened to grandma and grandpa. And our parents would always tell us, this could never happen in America, don't worry. And what I see now, I'm not saying it's the beginning of a Holocaust, God forbid. But I'm seeing a huge rise in anti-Semitic attacks. A a huge rise in threats. Swastikas being painted in Jewish dorm rooms across college campuses. Pictures of the concentration camp and Hitler being posted to Jewish doors and schools across America, saying that this is what they hope to happen. Bomb threats being called into dozens of Jewish community centers is an ongoing occurrence now. Last week, 2 different ancient Jewish cemeteries were desecrated, destroyed, graves destroyed. That's Amalek. That's Amalek. Well, we just learned what is the antidote for Amalek. Standing unified. Standing unified. And that's why the fellowship created this petition of unity. Because the Jewish community right now might feel differently on different political issues, might feel differently when it comes to Israel or different policies, but they are unified right now in fear against these threats and attacks. And what we need now is the Christian community, who I know stands with us. I know with all of my heart that the Christian community stands with the Jewish people right now. But what we need is for the wider Jewish community to see that. For the Jewish community in America to know those Christians who live next door love me, stand with me. Those Christians across the country care that my child's school was evacuated in Florida because it's a Jewish school and there was a bomb threat. We need to stand unified. That is how we're going to fight Amalek. And so I encourage you, I beg you. I'm going to post a link to our petition for Christians against hate, standing with the Jewish community in America against these threats. And during this month of Adar, I'm praying that we will find a lot of things to rejoice upon. We will not let the threats get us down, but we will continue to be joyous, because what we learn even from wicked Haman is that when we are joyous, nothing bad can happen. So I pray we will stand unified. I pray we will stand joyful before God. I pray we will read the book of Esther and get all the courage we need to stand up to evil without fear, and know that each one of us was chosen for such a time as this. And I beg you, Christians in America, sign this petition. Let our brothers and sisters, Jewish children who are evacuated from their schools, parents who have to worry about their children at Jewish community centers across America being targeted by bomb threats, people whose loved ones were destroyed, their cemetery, their gravestones, sign this petition and stand with us. Stand with the Jewish people. The link is all over my Facebook page, and my prayer is that you will share this with your churches and encourage every church member to sign. That you'll share it with your family members and encourage all your family members to sign. That you'll share it with your Bible study groups and encourage all your Bible study group members to sign. That you'll share it with your community, with your mailman, with your social worker, with your teachers, and encourage everyone to sign. Because we need to stand unified, Jews and Christians, against the Amalek that we're seeing in America right now that's rearing its head. We need to push it back down, and we push it down through unity. So I pray that you have enjoyed this teaching. I was raised on very good teachings from my father, Rabbi Eckstein, and my mother. I feel very blessed to be raised in such a loving home that taught me the values of God, that taught me the values of unity, how good and pleasant it is when brethren dwell together in peace, is what my father, Rabbi Eckstein, always said. And that was what I was raised on, me and my sisters, from my parents. And I pray that even if you weren't raised on this, that you will understand it, that it will speak to your heart, that you will share it, that you will preach it, and we will see the day where the lion dwells with the lamb, where the sword is plowed down into the sand, and there will be no need for fighting anymore. A day where we will have so much to rejoice in, so much unity, so much revelation. And until then, let's do our best to bring it to the world. So Adar Sameach, happy month of Adar, and I will see you before Purim. We will connect, and God bless you. Remember to sign the petition, to share the petition, and to stay unified in love. Shalom.